I think if Mikel Arteta wins the league in the 25-26 season, I think he puts himself in a class of his own. I think Mikel Arteta is a manager that, if you look at it and look at previous managers or current managers, whenever top managers eventually become, one of the best, they generally go through moments where they have to be at a smaller club to be able to build a team, build an identity, and then build, obviously, potential success with the team. But I look at Mikel Arteta and I look at some of the moments he's had since he's come into Arsenal. He's had to build at a higher level in terms of the club that he entered as a first-time manager. You look at the fact that Mikel came from Man City as an assistant coach, one of the assistants. But in terms of dealing with what Arsenal were at that time, when he first came in December 2019, he's dealing with something that most managers should have experience coming in to deal with. Dealing with the issues that were under Wenger in the last couple of years of his tenure. Unai, Emery, when he had the team as well, where it started decently and then it didn't. And then obviously Mikel coming in to be able to win an FA Cup. When he first got there within, December till obviously getting to the final in May, he had to beat teams like Man City and Chelsea at the time. He had to play a certain way that was only accommodating the players that he had. He had to play in a more deeper sort of shape, defensive shape, and was catching people on the break. If you remember, Aubameyang when he scored, for that FA Cup trophy. So if you look at it, Arteta has got into a club like Arsenal, started his career at the higher level, where most managers generally start, like I said earlier, about, starting at a mid-level, sort of having to build at smaller teams first before they become known, eventually moving to bigger teams. For example, Ancelotti, Serie B, had a team there, moved to Serie A, promoted them. But he had to start there at Serie B. Klopp at Mainz. You see certain coaches who've had the ability to hone their craft. Mourinho at Benfica, when he first started, he was at Benfica. 9 games he lasted. And this is not to say that Mikel Arteta is better than anyone. It's trying to say that Mikel is in a lane of his own based on the fact that generally managers with no experience don't get jobs like an Arsenal. Like the level Arsenal are, based on what they've done in their history, based on the name that they've garnered when Wenger was there. So at 37, he comes in, no experience. Why do people have to listen to him? You got to question that. Why do people have to listen to him? Yes, it's a project that Arsenal Football Club said that they were starting, but at the same time, why do they have to listen to Arteta? Why does his plans, his ideas have to be accepted? You got to question that. But because it seems there was something different about him, the mentality, his driven nature, I'm sure, his openness, maybe his also just sheer determination to say, look, I've got my ideas. I've got an understanding of how I want this team to play, and was able to reflect that quite comfortably to the hierarchy as well as obviously to the players, because the players who were there at the time, it wasn't a squad strong enough to win a Premier League at all. Based on the level of players that were there, and also based on the level of players, if you see what they managed to do after they left Arsenal, a lot of them ended up in mid-table environments, mid-table teams. Apart from maybe an Aubameyang who went on, and I'll speak about him later, to a Barcelona. But for the most part, you look at the team he inherited that won the FA Cup, it was quite a team that was generally for that mid-table environment. Now, if you look at the issues at the start, where he had a lot of fan sort of pressure when, if you remember that season in 2020, 2021 season, some of the results there were not good in terms of just being able to look at Arsenal and say, okay, with this new manager now, what is happening? Because it looks like at the start, the job was a bit too big, if you're honest. It looked like these issues that Wenger had, Unai had, it's not looking like it's going to change. But what I saw from Arteta, and a lot of managers or a lot of pundits say stuff like, okay, when a new manager comes in, they have to be showing things, pretty early to be able to weather storms and to be able to show, okay, is there any kind of light at the end of the tunnel, depending on if you're going into a club that are struggling. Arsenal was struggling. The things that kept, I think, Arteta in that job is that you saw moments where you saw the team starting to improve in terms of their setup, tactically. You started to see more of an understanding of how to be positionally. Now, that's not to say, again, in many moments, it was always adopted, because to achieve tactical brilliance, you need to improve the quality of players. It's always been that way. During games, if you look back and you're honest, you will see moments where Arsenal had results and victories that showed that this young manager, 37, 38 now, by the time 2021 season comes, he's showing enough to be able to weather the storm that, again, I say most managers will have to do at smaller clubs, weathering storms, learning the trade, being able to make mistakes quietly. He had to make mistakes loudly because Arsenal are a big club. He had the opportunity and took it. It seemed his understanding of the football game was apparent. You go back to December 2020 when Arsenal played Tottenham and they lost 2-0. If you remember, when Mourinho was the manager there, some of the comments he said about him, he mentioned that Arsenal, he believes if they stick with Arteta, they will be like the old Arsenal. Basically saying the Arsenal, when Arsenal were challenging with manager like Wenger, if you remember. So things like that, the early sort of time that he was at Arsenal, a manager like Mourinho said, you know what? We beat them, but the structure, the setup, the tactics, he had to keep thinking in the game to how to manage and, subdue Arsenal. It was a tactical game that he was like, look, this guy, he knows what he's on. He knows the game. He knows football. So the early times showed why he kind of stayed in the job, as opposed to some people say, oh, Arteta was afforded a lot of time. Yes, he was afforded a lot of time. That's beneficial in this day and age of football. But there were moments to show why. So you look at also the moment when he was appointed in September 2020, the full-time manager, meaning he was a coach, obviously, but he was now appointed and promoted to manager. That is an important time, I believe, also in Arteta's tenure too, because of the speed at which it happened. Like I said, coming in not having experience, but being able to then show enough, quality, according to hierarchy, I'm sure, show enough understanding, show enough, getting people on side, whether it's the players, the staff, and he started getting fans quietly on side. Yes, it was up and down in those early days of the 2020, 2021, but he started showing, like I said, things that showed that, okay, this is why he's still in a job. And this is why you have to give him a bit more time. When he became the manager officially with the promoted position that he got from head coach in September 2020, I think that was more important. People may just look at it as, oh, it's just a title. No, it's not. Ask Ruben Amorim as to how important that title is. Him saying, I'm not a coach, I'm a manager. Him making it clear what that entails. The increased responsibility, the increased ability to make certain decisions that are beneficial, he believes, or what a manager will believe, for the club and for the players and for the direction of the continual direction of where the club should go on the pitch. So those were the moments where you started seeing that this guy, from a young 37-year-old manager coming in, getting to the 40th year of his life, being able to maintain a form of decency with the team to be able to compete, never finishing outside of the top 10 in his first job. That's not something that really happens. First job at the highest level, Premier League, Arsenal. Remember the levels we're talking about that somebody who's not had an experience goes into with. This is a big club. If you look at the squad quality when he first arrived, as I mentioned earlier, about certain players were, sold eventually. They ended up at mid-table clubs. They ended up in different leagues that, showed a lot of the teams that they were in were not at the level Arsenal were. So being able to manage for the 2 years that he did and get them to finishes of 8th twice, and then obviously when he got to the Champions League, which was a close effort between Arsenal and Tottenham. I remember they were leading and then they eventually got 5th. That was the one season where I thought, okay, they probably gave it away there. But apart from that, you have to look at the squad. You had to look at that squad and say, you know what, maybe that was fair. Them finishing 5th in that season, maybe that was fair with the firepower at that time that Tottenham had with Kane and Son. But squad quality was an issue when he first arrived. Squad quality was an issue even in the first 2 years, I believe. In order for Arsenal or any team to really make a challenge, you're going to have a level where you're having world-class players in the team or very, very good players, close to world-class. Those are the sort of level of players that challenge for leagues. But when it got to the point where 2022-23 season came, he signed Zinchenko, he signed Jesus. Immediately, the change in style of the team was apparent with the inversion of Zinchenko and obviously Jesus with his ability to play outside the box, give and go, be a team player more so with his style. The fluency that Arsenal showed in that season was, if you look back at it, was the season that a lot of Arsenal fans speak on, about the fluency aspect of things going forward. So you also saw the addition of, Saliba when his loan ended. And when he came into that team, the difference that enabled the team to look even more solid. When he partnered Gabriel, that was the start of that relationship that we've seen, over the years and all the way till, the present times, the effect of it. So these are all things that he decided. Saliba coming back and getting into the team. He came in initially, Arteta, and said, no, he should go on loan. But eventually came back for the 2022-23 season. Signed those two players, like I said, in Zinchenko and Jesus, and then changed the whole style of Arsenal's football. And had a title race. A title race against the two best managers in the world in Klopp and Pep. So a manager who at that point had only had 2.5 years in a job of his first job gets to have a title race with Pep Guardiola. These are things that I'm saying that puts him in a lane of his own. This is not to say he's not against criticism, meaning he cannot be criticized. It's just to look at it from a specific perspective and say, you know what? I think this guy has things that you don't see a lot, to be able to get to that level and challenge within that short space of time, considering the mess that Arsenal were in, considering the mentality issues that Arsenal players had. He made it clear. If there's people that want to be here, they will be here at the start of the season or when he first came in his press conference, then you will be here. But if not, you can go. The fans he managed to get on side after the 2022-23 season or during that season. That's when you started seeing more of a change of like, okay, can Arsenal now be considered viable now in ways where they're now challenging for the big prizes? Because that season they did. But the question is always, can you do it as time goes on? Obviously, they missed out in the end. Experience of City, the class of City, the world-class players of City prevailed. They were leading, never been there before, and they fell off. But the point is to be able to get to challenge at that level with that lack of experience, no job prior, to get into that point is something that you've got to look at and say, you know what? Different. When Aubameyang was at Arsenal, we know what Aubameyang did for Arsenal in terms of his goal scoring ability, his ability to score goals with class. We know the levels he got to. But he let Aubameyang go in February 2022 when there was a supposed disciplinary issue. There was even conversations that required Edu and Arteta and the hierarchy to try and get Aubameyang back into the team. But Arteta said no. Again, to give him that authority to make that final decision when fans, pundits were saying, you know what, I think he maybe should be integrated. Some were saying, in fact, it's right that Arteta has done what he's done. But the point is, at that young age as a manager, to say, you know what, this is what the process is going to be. We're going to take out our best striker. We're going to take out the striker that scores, you know, double figures and 20 plus goals in a season and say, you know what, you've got to go. Then the Ramsdale and Raya dilemma. Him choosing Ramsdale, him signing Ramsdale, top keeper, right? Did his job, did his thing. But then Arsenal made a surprise move for David Raya. When they signed him, people were like, but where's Ramsdale going to play? How's this going to work? Everyone questioned it. A lot of Arsenal fans questioned it. People, pundits, everyone questioned it. But to be able to make a decision that could rock the boat, right? But he said, you know what? I'm going to sign a keeper that I've probably always wanted, but I couldn't get at that time I wanted him. So I'm going to sign Ramsdale. But when I get the keeper I want, I'm going to get him and sign him for the idea that I want for this team. The tactical idea I want for this team. People were saying, but Ramsdale's a good shot stopper. He's this, he's that. Yeah, but David Raya, Arteta, saw something from the stats, from his knowledge of obviously how he is as a person and his keeping ability, and said, you know what? He is the guy for me. Another big decision. But as time has gone on, you've seen it worked. But these are things that managers get to do at smaller clubs first before they garner their name and move on to bigger clubs. But he's having to do it at the top level immediately. Making these changes, having issues at the start of his tenure. Even I didn't even mention some of the games where teams like Man City beat Arsenal by 5-0, 4-1 at the Etihad in 22-23. 5-0 prior season. So these are things that he's had to learn on the job, learn in the industry in terms of how to deal with certain things as a manager, different to a player. So when you look at it, the time frame he's been there, people like to talk about a lot. But think of it, when you're going into your first job, you're going into managing 20 plus people. You're going to now change your mentality, a winning mentality you're trying to infuse when you haven't won before, but you're trying to infuse that. You're then trying to now change how the fans look at the club. You want the fans to be more involved. You change that. You see the improvements of the training standards. You see some of the players, they mention it, how meticulous he is, how he focuses on nullifying the other team, the changes that he's had to make, the moments where the struggles took place. He's had to weather the storm in front of the media at one of the biggest clubs and one of the best leagues in the world. He couldn't have time to work on his craft quietly at a smaller club.
He had to do it all at a bigger club, which gives more, as they say, pressure. But he's had to manage that and done it pretty well. This is what makes him different to other managers who have been in different clubs, you know, garnering their name quietly before they moved on to bigger clubs, or before they took a team that were, you know, credible. He's had to wait to get to that point to make a credible team worthy of challenging and potentially winning the league. From the 25-26 season, this is the season where, I've said this before, Mikel Arteta now has a squad worthy of winning the league. I think 2022-23, 23-24, and 24-25 seasons, they had squads that could challenge. But I look at the totality of the squad and I say, you could have won it maybe in 23-24. 2 points difference. You could have. But you maybe couldn't have. Because you look at the squad, you look at what was on the bench, you look at some of the moments where you couldn't pick certain players to say, you can change that. You can change that game. It's tight. At Aston Villa, Emirates, when Wally Watkins scored those goals, let's look at someone on the bench. There was no one that you can really count on wholeheartedly to say, you know what, I think I'm going to put him on to try and open the door. Right? But they could have won it in that season. They didn't. The more experienced, the more fuller squad of Man City won it in 23-24. 24-25, injury crisis, right? There was a lot of injuries in that team. And again, you look at that bench, wasn't good enough. Wasn't strong enough. Players playing out of position, right back, Partey. You look at things that he's had to manage in that regard. Now, this is the season where if Mikel wins it, it will put him in a class of his own now. There's players now that have been in a club a bit more longer now, a bit more understanding of the title races, the Declan Rices, the Bukayo Sakas, more understanding of what it takes because they've been there now. They've understood it. They've grown up, I would say. But more importantly, they've added better quality, and that's what wins leagues. And this is the time where now Arteta has to be assessed on winning this league. And where they are, they have everything to win it. And this will put Arteta and his backroom staff in a different level, in a different lane, in a different conversation. And just imagine if he wins 2 trophies. But my opinion is this: Arteta will be in a different league, a different lane if he wins the league in 25-26 season. And based on what I've said and many other things I could have added, it shows that this guy was different. So now it's all about showing it, Mikel Arteta, and winning the league. And the players showing it, more importantly, because they've got the quality. But it will be interesting to find out what people think. Like the video and let me know. Do you think Mikel Arteta is in a class of his own based on how he started his career at Arsenal and what is potentially on the cards for them winning the league?